Yo, what up, everyone? Austin Smith here, checking in with you and welcoming you to episode number 11 of the Made Hoops podcast. Hey, thanks for tapping in and hanging out with us today. Look, in episode number 11, you're going to hear from our good brother, Eric Hampford, who's our director of scouting here at Made Hoops. Listen, in today's episode, he is going to break down his analysis and takeaways from the EYBL stop number 3 in Louisville, Kentucky. We'll hear from Eric talking about what he loved from the E15 and E16 levels during his time at the circuit. And look, he's going to break down some analysis. We also even had some 2026 players that stepped into the plate and got the job done as well. So again, stay tuned because this episode is going to be a good one. Again, with that being said, welcome to episode number 11 of the Made Hoops podcast. E, it's good to see you, brother. Glad to see you doing well and things look good in your life, brother. How you feeling?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Coming off a big weekend at EYBL in Louisville. Exciting for me because I get to check up on a ton of these 16U and 15U kids who I'm obviously seeing a lot, especially in their 8th grade year, and I'm trying to project where they're going. So now I get to see how some of those reactions from me a year or 2 years ago are going now in real time.
Facts. EYBL Session 3 was in Louisville, Kentucky, and plenty of action. Like you mentioned, you had a chance to watch some of the 15 and 16. So both of those divisions. And I think it's pretty cool. And to give people some backstory, you've been following these kids for some time now. These are some of the same kids that have been on our platform before and played back when they're in middle school. And now they're at the 15 and 16 levels. It's a different perspective as you see their game blossoming, as you see them growing, maturing, and all those aspects. You get a first chance to kind of evaluate, I guess, in a whole new way, but you got a perspective too, because you saw them first. You know, you can sit like that. So tell us about that, E. What's it like for you getting a chance to kind of be around the full spectrum from players as they develop?
It's kind of cool because I feel like I have a unique advantage in that when most mainstream media, grassroots media are seeing these guys, 16U, 15U, that's their first snapshot of a kid, right? Whereas for me, I'm seeing these guys 2 or 3 years prior. So there are actually a lot of times where guys who I trust, evaluators, they come to me and they ask about certain kids and they'll be like, wow, I'm really high on so-and-so. I saw this kid for the first time, he did this, this, and this. And I might have a counter and say, well, he was doing that 2 years ago, but he's not doing X, Y, and Z, which I kind of needed him to start doing at this point, right? So it's like my litmus test is a little bit different because I'm seeing where they're at on that developmental spectrum, where other people are seeing them for that gives me a little bit of a different advantage. And obviously that comes with, hey, there's a lot of times where they're progressing as I hope they would. And then there's other times where it's, oh, or why isn't this working, right? So it's cool. I get to tap in with a lot of different kids. I got to see a lot of different parents who I've met over the years and had relationships with. So it's cool to catch up and just get a restart and a refresh on everybody.
Love it. That's good stuff. It's always interesting. And this has been a pretty cool aspect of me being what Made is you see some of these top players and top guys and players who have gone and transitioned. And you, again, like you mentioned, being able to learn how you've evaluated them time and time again. And then you get to have those special relationships with their families. I think that's pretty cool as well, an aspect that we don't talk about as much, you know, being in the media, like the relationship building. And I think that's unique because it gives you a chance to kind of give an authentic truth about the player. It helps you figure out how that player ticks. And then, man, when we're able to connect with college coaches and people all over, man, our platform has a unique advantage. I'll say just that. That's pretty cool nonetheless. But let's get right to it. I don't want to waste any more time. EYBL Session 3, Louisville, Kentucky, E16s. Eric, talk to me, man. What did you like from the 16U division, just overall from a standpoint?
Well, for me, I'm not watching much of the 17s. That's just not where my focus is right now. So 16s is the farthest away from where I'm seeing a lot of them, right? So 2 years is a big gap. So I'm seeing some of these guys, you know, literally maybe this is the first time I've seen them in 2 years for some of them, right? So for me, they're mature, they're stronger, they're grown, they're more athletic. I'm getting a chance to see some of these guys at the 16U level, and it's like, whoa, okay, like this is where we're at. Like you really start to see some of these guys looking really different. So for me over the weekend, I mean, there was a ton of different guys who kind of moved the needle. And while I'm looking at them, I'm thinking back nostalgically to where they were. Yeah. And that's obviously just a huge part of what I do and what we do at Made. So right off the jump, like one guy, Robert Wright III, team final, Delaware kid, goes to Newman Goretti. Really had a big weekend as far as he's a guy who has this uncanny ability to finish plays around the rim, right? Like that's for his size, it's like, and I heard parents actually making comments about it in the stands. They're like, how are you going to let this kid continually do this over and over and over again? And it's like, I literally said to the one parent, I'm like, yo, it's not just your guys. He does this to everybody, right? Like he's one of those guys that's incredibly unique. And another thing that's kind of cool with a situation like that is I think back to Robert as an 8th grader, and he was a smaller guard. 7th and 8th grade, he was a much smaller guard, but he still had that craftiness to him. And he has a younger brother who's in 8th grade now. So his younger brother is very talented as well. And I'm starting to think, all right, is Stefan going to end up where Robert is in 2 years? Like those are the types of conversations that you're having with yourself, where you're like, maybe I need to bet on his brother because of what I'm seeing Robert do too. So Robert's one guy who really stood out. Another guy who, you know, I've been very familiar with for probably 5 years at this point, Jeremiah Jenkins on Expressions Elite. Always been a very quick, jet quick, tough as nails guard, about 6 foot. There's always been some questions around like just his growth, how much bigger he can get, and how high of a level he can get to. But the kid just continues to make plays and make people better. Like he's just a hard-nosed defender, a leader. And you always want to see a kid like that succeed, right? Like I've known him, he's a good kid. You just want to see him get a chance to show at that highest level, which obviously we know the Nike EYBL is. And I love being able to get to see a kid like him after a big game. Like he had, I believe it was Sunday, some national media from the high school sites surrounding him and talking to him and getting some of his information, because it's like, all right, my man's starting to take the next step and other people are starting to notice the hard work. So Jeremiah is another kid who had a really good weekend. But there's always kids who I'm not aware of, right? That haven't come through, that I'm not maybe privy to seeing before high school action. One of those kids for Indy Heat was Canine Catchings, 6'6" wing, super athletic, like has all the tools, but actually had some nice production. And I was actually put onto him a few months back by my coworker, Brian Flynn, who was saying, hey, you got to look out for this kid. He's going to be really good. And I think this grassroots season, he's going to really start to pop for some people. And it seemed like EYBL Session 3 in Louisville is where it happened for him. A ton of different guys, man. Honestly, like team takeover, we always know what they're going to do. Like it's a program thing. We talked about it time and time again. There's 16Us. Daquan Davis, point guard, had a monster weekend. And he's just one of several guys for them. Caden Lewis, Team Mello, I really liked. Jaron Stevenson, one of the best bigs in the country in that 2024 class. I got a chance to catch up with him. So skilled, could really kill you on different levels. Just shot blocker, does a lot of different stuff that I love. And then another kid, Curtis Givens for Mocan, is trending in the right direction. He's headed to Montverde this fall, and it's looking like he's going to have a monster high school season. So you're seeing where these guys are at now, especially the 16s, because that's such a pivotal recruiting year. And you're starting to forecast like, well, some of these guys hopefully are parlaying this into what they're going to do in the winter. And that's really where they're going to start jockeying for some of that position as far as, you know, potential McDonald's All-American votes next year, different things of that nature, which are really important. Like that 16U year is very important for those types of things. So that's where I'm at with this class, right? It's no more of they have the potential. It's okay, where is that now turning into production, right? So you also had a few guys in that E16 bracket who are freshmen playing up that were also very good. Josan Sannon, looks like he's the next star in the BABC program. Smooth 6'5" scorer, really gets it on every single level that he wants. Really, really impressive weekend for me in his eyes. As far as another guy, Team Griffin, BJ Davis, another 6'5", 6'6", really long, special talent. He helped them have a big weekend. And then Aaron Rowe, point guard for Mocan Elite, is also a 2025 who was playing up and doing a ton of different damage, just has a different gear in the open floor, very smooth around the rim, but has some explosive athleticism. So you're seeing how some of those younger guys can mix in playing up. And as you know, E16 basketball it's big boy basketball, right? Like this is no longer just the long gangly kids trying to see where they fit in, right? Like you're talking about some grown men they're playing up against at the highest level. So there's no better test than that 17U and 16U level.
Eric, let me ask you this, because again, I love how you talk about that this is no longer kind of potential. When you play on the E16 stage, it's production, right? And so you having a chance to see some of these players again in the past and knowing how you've watched them grow, and from your perspective, when you're evaluating, what skill sets have you seen consistently translate from players that you may have saw a couple of years ago, players you may have seen when you're not just playing up on E16 to playing E15? Like what translates time and time again that you notice?
Shooting's a big thing. I mean, you see what the state of the game now is at the highest level.
Yeah.
From the NBA on down, it's a trickle down effect, right? Whatever's hot in the NBA, playing style, however some of those top NBA guys are playing the game, that usually dictates how it's being modeled at the lower levels from college, high school, developmental, grassroots. So a good example for this that I always like to use, that you may be familiar with, is Tahad Pettiford, who plays 17U for the New York Lightning. Tahad in middle school was always the smallest guard. Like he was always so tiny, but he could shoot the basketball at such a high level. And for me, it was always, if he grows, it's going to be a problem for everybody. So I knew he had that translatable shooting skill. It was just, when's he going to grow? Right. You know, I look at his dad, and his dad's 6'2", 6'3". I'm like, this got to happen for him. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen for him. Yeah. And then right around, probably last year, started to really grow and start to get some muscles. And now he's starting to jump too, which I didn't know if that was going to happen, but he's starting to be a little low-key leaper as well. So for me, shooting is really that skill that's just so translatable, right? It's at every level. And even before the game changed, even as I was growing up, and I'm sure as you were growing up, coaches always said to me, look, if you can shoot the basketball, you will find a way onto a roster as a specialist, right? You may be the last man on the bench, but if you can shoot at an elite level, you will find a spot somewhere.
Yeah. Without question. No, I totally agree with that. Wow, that's good to hear you say, because again, I love getting the backstory, and like you have that backstory. Like this is some of these guys. It's not new for you. You've seen this time and time again, and that's some good in-depth, I guess, analysis for our listeners to have, just so they can get to see how the state of the game is going and see how things are going and see what goes across the board. But like you mentioned, man, the E16 is one level beneath 17U. I mean, like, that's
time's running out for them to put it together and produce. But at the same time, like, I can't lie, like there's still so many kids, even at that level, where you're still looking at, man, they're just starting to figure it out. And you're still banking on that long-term potential too, right? Like a kid like Isaiah Evans with TSF, like 6'7", long wing, can shoot it, can pass, like kind of has that Brandon Ingram body type from when Brandon was around that age, where you're starting to look into the future of what he could be, which can be a dangerous game too, right? So a lot of that off court and all the stuff that you're really trying to use to round out prospect evaluation it's so important. But I'm not going to lie and say that it's all production at E16 and E17, because it's not. So much of it is you're still trying to see who am I betting on long term. And some of those guys are going to hit. And if you're good at this, majority of those guys will hit, and some of them won't. And a lot of that's on them.
Kind of just charge it to the game. I love it. I love it. Let's keep going, brother. E15s now. Got it. So again, talked about the 16. Let's go to the 15 now. These are kids that you just saw, man, like last year. Some of them you fresh out, as they say. What did you like about the E15s in your time in Louisville?
What I like about the E15s, specifically in this group of E15s, is that the 2025 class looks like it's going to be very, very strong on a national level. So right off the jump, there's a ton of kids that I saw last year and I loved, right? So you have a guy like Caleb Wilson with Alabama Fusion, someone that you're probably familiar with in the Atlanta area, had a big freshman year, probably goes about legit 6'8" now, face up, can stretch the floor, shoot it. And just the upside potential is so high for him. Another guy, Alier Malouk, Pennsylvania kid, hailing from the Pittsburgh area, 6'10", long, went through a massive growth spurt, probably grew 6 inches in the past 2.5 years. So grew up as a guard, but now he's probably the biggest kid on the court in pretty much every game he's on, has some of that translatable shooting skill, just needs to continue to work on, finishing around the rim, getting stronger, a lot of those different things. Maper Maker, Arizona Unity, same thing. Comes from a long line of kids in the Maker family, which we know a lot of those guys are 6'10" plus, can do some really interesting stuff on the floor. As a 15-year-old, he's ahead of the curve, right? He's got a chance to be very good. Brad Beal, I liked Nick Randall, who's about 6'7", 6'8", same thing, is an interchangeable piece. He was actually new to me. I hadn't seen Nick at all in the middle school ranks. So a kid like him popping up. When you see a kid like Nick Randall, those guys only add to the depth of this 2025 class, right? Like, we knew it was going to be strong to begin with. Now you start sprinkling in guys like him, right, and it's really going to start to build on the whole depth of this group overall. Florida Rebels, you have Trayvon Maddox, 6'7" wing from South Carolina. You have Jameer Jones, another incredibly explosive player. Night Riders, the Night Riders just continue to win and do their thing, but behind the Boozer twins, Alex Lloyd, and with a group like Night Riders, yes, they're talented. There's no doubt about it, but it's not like they're stacked at every position, but they have a continuity. They've played together for so many years, that group of kids, and that means something, right? That's the one thing I'll always say about circuits.
Talk about that, Eric. Do that.
The continuity is just so important, because there's so many different coaches who think you could just go assemble the 5 best kids in your area and throw them out on a court and you'll win games. That works at the middle school level when you have a physical advantage over a lot of different kids who haven't grown and developed yet.
Yeah.
That isn't happening on the EYBL circuit. I've seen a ton of loaded teams that can't figure it out, man. Like it's like any level of basketball. You got to have guys who buy into their role, who understand what their role is, and they're willing to sacrifice for the good of the team in order to win. Now, obviously, these kids are all very talented if they're even on this platform to begin with, but it's so much more important to have guys who understand the pecking order of their team and what they do and how they do it.
Right. Eric, let me ask you this. Because you talking about a bunch of great players here. You giving us some, man, grade A analysis, as you already know. That's why you're the director here, bro. That's why, listen, we on this podcast, brother. My man E deserves his shine. He deserves that. But if knowing what the EYBL is, Eric, if I'm a fan or just a watcher, like, what should I expect if I'm saying, hey, I'm gonna go watch an EYBL session, even at the 15s and 16s level? What am I walking into?
You're walking into the best of the best, right? Like, I think it's a shock factor for a lot of people. Now, if you've grown up and you're an evaluator and you go to this, it's commonplace, right? Like, I walk into the gym and it's like, I've been doing this for 10 years. Like, I know what the best of the best looks like.
Yeah.
But it's always fun to see people who haven't seen this level of basketball before, and they can't believe that kids this age are capable of doing the things they're doing. Like even as I was leaving Louisville, I was at the airport on Monday night, and I'm coming out of the bathroom and I hear an older gentleman talking to Mapur Maker, who is obviously an E15 class of 2025 freshman. And he was like, "Is Louisville recruiting you?" And Mapur's like, "I'm only a freshman." And he was like, "A freshman in high school?" Like, he could not believe a kid that big was that young. But that's what it is, man. Like these are the 1% athletes, the best of the best in the entire country. So it's E15, E16. It's every single game is a dogfight. You don't get a game off, right? Like, and you hear so many of these coaches saying, we can't worry about our next 4 games. We have to worry about the next game that we have, right? Because as soon as you overlook somebody, you come out, you get punched in the mouth and you lose, because there's a reason every single one of these teams is here. So it's always interesting to see the perspective of people who don't live in this ecosystem, this grassroots ecosystem, of them starting to see what this level of basketball really looks like.
Wow. Yeah, listen, years ago, before I kind of got into the media side, as a player, you go up against height all the time, but in the media, it's different. You're around these players time and time again. And even myself, man, I have to sit back sometimes and be like, wow. That's just being transparent, because you get around it so much and it becomes normal. But when you take a step back and you just watch as a basketball fan, just a person who loves basketball, these kids can go. So
it's also, it's even more impressive when you talk about the kids who play up too, right?
Yeah,
like,
for real.
There were a ton of kids this past weekend who are current 8th graders who I've seen all year, who are starting to earn some of their stripes at the E15 level. And I tried to warn a bunch of them in the winter when they're like, "Oh, I'm playing 15s in the spring." I'm like, I hope you understand, like, you throw this E15 term around like you're just going to walk onto the court and go get buckets. Like, that's not how this is going to go. Like, you're going to have to play your role, and you're going to have to, figure out this learning curve, because it's no joke, man. But there was a group of kids who were there that were in middle school, and they held their own, man. And you got to give credit to those type of guys.
Yeah, give me a couple. Who are some 2026s that played up and really did their thing? Do you have a couple in mind that you could think of?
I mean, AJ DeBonsa.
I knew you were going there first, but that's good.
Yeah. Like, I mean, at this point, it's so funny. AJ hasn't even graduated. Well, I guess he just did graduate middle school, I should say. I feel like a broken record. I've been talking about this kid for 2 years already. Special. He's just a special talent. It's nice to see some of the other high school specific evaluators, the rivals, the 247s, see him and say, wow, this kid has a chance to be special. And that's what people were saying. I mean, he did his thing. He really was dominant in the E15 division. You had Cam Holmes with Arizona Unity, another one of our big West Coast kids this year who did his thing. Jaden Johnson held down the Midwest, talented 6'5" guard, really advanced his perimeter skills over the past several months. So he was holding it down for Brad Beal. Darian Payday Moore with the City Rocks did his thing. Team Mello had Josiah Kennedy, Adam Umadoc, both out there getting buckets. And then I even peeped TJ Allen with BABC as a 7th grader playing up on the 15U level. And he didn't look out of place. He held it down. He played his role. He's a point guard. He got people the ball, defended hard. I mean, he knew, like, for a 13-year-old, hey, I'm coming here and I'm just going to do what I need to do.
Hey, I'm going to figure it out some way, somehow, man. I'm going to try to be productive. Eric, one last thing for you, man, as we kind of wrap up this episode. Getting into July, right? And we know things get crazy with Nike and EYBL and very intense in terms of the last sessions and closing out the summer season, because we're in June now. what's your biggest piece of advice to a lot of these prospects, especially that you would talk to or you evaluated for the E15s and E16s and possibly some 2026s who played up? What's your biggest piece of advice to them to close out the season?
Probably get in the gym, right? Like some of them live in the gym. I mean, a lot of them probably live in the gym if they're at this level, but some of them don't live in the gym as much as they should. Some of them have just incredible athletic gifts, but get in the gym, sharpen those skills, man. That's what it's about. The whole point of July is, you know, it's a showcase product. You're out there trying to play for the college coaches. You're trying to earn these scholarships, right? Like you can't just show up, tie your shoes and expect to just hoop, right? You gotta take the weak parts of your game, and that takes, you know, a humbling experience. Look in the mirror. You know, some of these kids may have gotten busted at Louisville session, right? So it's like, hey, what do I need to improve on? What can I get better at? Some self-reflection, get in the gym, really sharpen some of those weaknesses, try to make them strengths, and be ready, because July is the month where you could really help yourself from a recruiting standpoint. So it's get in the gym and just get better.
100 facts on that one, brother. Appreciate that insight, E, man. And I hope everybody would take note of that. That's the place you need to be if you plan to have a really productive July. So, Eric, great advice from you as always. Well, man, that wraps up this episode. Appreciate all your great insight from session 3, man. Tapping in with us about the E15s and E16s and the great action that went down in Louisville, Kentucky. Any last things from you, E? I know we're rolling and shaking here at Made, man. We got a lot of stuff coming up soon, so it's moving.
We got MSA East Coast camp this weekend in DC. Going to be loaded. That'll be fun. Next week we launch our debut middle school academy West Coast camp in Las Vegas, which is going to be obviously very fun to kind of break ground on that. And then July, we got 8th grade finale in Augusta.
Yeah, I'm getting messages, man.
Man. It is no joke. That's where the national champion will be crowned. So you're going to have a ton of these teams who played in the winter circuit, East Coast, West Coast, our spring circuit, which the championships will be next weekend in Memphis. Some of those teams are already trying to look ahead to Augusta. And I'm like, yo, you got to figure out the spring circuit championship first.
It's hot, man. It's hot. It is hot.
This is the time of the year, man. This is the time of the year.
Facts. No doubt about it, man. We can't wait to get this ball rolling. Sounds good for sure. Eric, appreciate you, my brother. Thanks for tapping in with us today. Everyone, thanks for tuning in to episode 10 of the Made Hoops podcast. I am your host, Austin Smith. We heard from our director of scouting, Eric Hampford, as he brought us everything his biggest takeaways from EYBL session number 3 in Louisville, Kentucky. A ton of great action from the E15s and E16s. And Eric, thanks for your insight. Everyone stay tuned because episode 11 will be coming soon. Keep tapped in with us with everything exclusively here on the Made Hoops podcast.